Hi, everyone. My name is Daniela Fernandez, and I am the Director of Community Engagement for the 211 New Brunswick service. My goal for today is to give you an overview of how the 211 service works. I'll share a few different stories based on real calls that we have answered at 211 to give you a sense of how it is that we can support people who reach out to 211 for support. And I'll also highlight a few different service features that might be of interest to folks doing community work or working with the public, so that they also know how to leverage the 211 service to make their work a little bit easier. So my contact info is on the screen if you want to follow up with me to invite me to any other presentations as part of any other groups that you might be involved in, or if you want to reach out to me for any promotional materials or pamphlets that you might be able to distribute to help us raise awareness of 211 in your community. So for now, I'm just going to get started with some basic info about 211 for those of you that may not be familiar with the service. So 211 itself is an information and referral service that connects people to the full range of human, social, community, and government supports available. And the idea is that the service helps people to quickly and effectively navigate the very complex network of community and government programs to help them find the supports that they need for their specific situation. The service is completely free and confidential, and our phones are answered 24/7, 365 days a year. And what's also wonderful is that we have the capacity to answer calls in over 170 different languages, thanks to our interpretation service partner, Language Line. So if ever you are working with anyone that might need language support beyond English or French, even if all they can say is the name of the language they wish to speak, that'll cue our navigators to bring an interpreter into the line. So it becomes a three-way call to facilitate communication between the caller and the navigator that answers the call at 211, but the call remains free and confidential either way. And 211 is a service that's now available to every single person who lives within Canada. We are present in every province, city, and territory and community across the country. In some provinces, there may not be a helpline itself, but the website remains available as a database that you can always search through to find programs and services. But we do have 211 coverage all across Canada. And since the service launched here in New Brunswick back in October of 2020, we have been able to ensure that well over 100,000 people who call New Brunswick home have been connected to the right programs and services when they have faced different challenges in their life. So we're also really proud to say that the distribution of calls that are coming into 211 New Brunswick actually spans the entire province. And that speaks to us as to how well received the service has been, especially by folks in rural communities where access to services and information can be a little bit more limited sometimes. So that 100,000 people that we have helped in the past includes all of the different channels that you can use to connect with 211, which I'll cover later in the presentation. But that basically includes the helpline, the website, the chat feature on the website, and the emails that we can answer as well for folks that prefer to send us questions in writing rather than make the phone call to 211. So 211's goal is to be a bridge. We really just want to help connect individuals and community agencies to one another to help ensure that everyone feels heard and supported and that no one is left behind. We know that people don't often know what resources are available out there, let alone where to begin to find them. So 211's goal is to play a connecting role to make it as easy as possible for everyone to access the help that they need when they need it most. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I'll share a few different stories based on calls that we have answered and received at 211, just to give you a sense of how it is that we can support people on the line. So for this particular story, a disabled older adult called 211, and he initially sounded really angry and really upset. So the community navigator who answered his call simply took some time to listen to him and allowed him to just kind of vent out some emotions and frustrations to try to get at what made him pick up the phone that day. So it turns out that he needed to make some essential home repairs, and winter was coming, and he didn't have the financial means to do this. And he was convinced that there was no help out there for him. He felt really frustrated after having reached kind of like a number of dead ends after contacting different community agencies and offices. And he really felt like there was no one out there who cared enough to help him find a solution. But after hearing him share his situation and asking some simple questions about things like his age, his income, his mobility concerns, his living situation, his network of social supports, and so on, the navigator at 211 was actually able to offer some options to him in his own community to help offset the cost of those home repairs, including programs offered by social development and options like the disability tax credit offered by CRA, for example. So after this, he actually expressed a lot of gratitude and surprise because he had no idea that these resources were available to him. He said he was actually keen to get started with the next steps in his journey, and he felt grateful and supported after speaking with someone who genuinely cared enough to take the time to understand what he was going through and who could help him find some options to make things a little bit easier. So as you can see, what I gave you at the beginning of the session is like the technical definition of the 211 service. I'd really like you to remember 211 as that best friend that you can call anytime with basically any concern, and who will actively listen to you with empathy and without judgment to guide you through your options to help you find the resources that you need. We know that life doesn't throw challenges at us at a convenient time. So it doesn't matter if it's, 3 a.m. on a Sunday, first thing Monday morning, during the holidays, you can always rest assured that 211 is there for you. So how does the service actually work? As you saw by that last example, when someone contacts 211, they're going to be connected with a real person, our community service navigator, who will simply ask some questions about the caller's situation and then suggest some programs or services that can help based on their eligibility. What's also great is that oftentimes callers can even be registered for eligible programs on the spot during the same call, which eliminates the added stress of them trying to wade through changing programs and information, which can often change every day almost. And another little known fact about 211 is that we can also offer a callback service for vulnerable callers. Now we do this as an, we offer this as an option for people who are in really complex situations and who lack social supports, just to help ensure that the information and referrals that we have given them have actually gotten them the support that they were looking for and to explore further options if that didn't happen. So for example, in the last story, that gentleman who might have had some mobility issues, he was living on his own, it was winter time. Um, if he had been, maybe running out of food or medications and things like that, our navigator would have then offered a callback service. And if he gave us his consent and his contact info, then we would have called them back sometime like 24 to 72 hours later, just to help make sure that the connections we provided and the information we gave him actually got them, whether it was the medication or the food or the services that he needed in that moment, so that he wouldn't fall through the cracks in the handoff between service providers. Similarly, we can also offer additional supports to callers on a case-by-case basis, such as supports with filling out some online application forms for government programs specifically. We can also transfer a person's call directly to the appropriate service and so on. So our goal is really to kind of remove as many barriers as possible so that people can then access the services that they need on a timely basis. Now, obviously, we work in collaboration with other service providers and emergency service providers to make all of this possible. So I'll tell you another story to illustrate how that works. So in this particular case, a mother of 5 children called 211 looking for supports to feed her family. As the conversation went on, she shared that she wasn't working, her husband was, but unfortunately, he was acting violent at home. So immediately the community navigator asked the mother if her and the children were safe. The mother said yes. The navigator then asked if she had all of the resources and information that she might need in order to find some support around the domestic violence situation. And the mother said that in fact, she was already connected with a social worker that was helping her to make a plan to get her and the children out of that home safely. So that was good. But if at any point during the conversation the answers had been different, this would have been a completely different call. So 911 would have likely been involved directly into the call to provide support if they had been in any danger, and supports around domestic violence would have also been provided to her. What she needed in that moment was help around food security. But now that we had a better understanding of the big picture and the transition that she was navigating, we also provided her with information on employment counseling services, women's shelters, utility assistance programs to help her pay some bills, and even programs that could provide not only food, but also clothing for her children as well, just to provide them with more resources to navigate that transition to a different life outside of that home where they were living. So as you can see, we don't offer counseling directly at 211, but what we can do is support individuals by connecting them to the right supports at the right time and by collaborating with other emergency service providers as needed to make sure that people get timely support for their situation. And really, that's the magic of 211. That human touch and compassion that our community navigators bring to the service makes all the difference for callers that would otherwise feel lost or overwhelmed just trying to navigate the myriad of community resources all on their own. We know from experience likely that it's not always easy to look up resources online and then have to filter through pages and pages of information just to try to figure out what you might be eligible for and what might be the best fit for your situation. So our 211 navigators are there to ease that burden of research for you, whether you are someone in need or a service provider or a family member looking to provide for someone else's complex needs. So this human element is really one of the biggest value adds of the 211 service. Our community navigators are not volunteers. It's a question I get asked really often. They're actually fully trained professionals with backgrounds in social work, counseling, or psychology, and they can work with marginalized populations, people in crisis, situations that need escalation, and they can collaborate with other essential emergency service providers or helplines, for example, as needed to ensure that people receive support as soon as possible. So this is really an invitation to anyone that might be a service provider in the room to also connect with us to let us know about the work that you're doing, the programs and services that you're providing. You can always come in and train our navigators so that we can continue to make the right referrals at the right time. As you can imagine, this is a collaborative effort between 211 and all of the partner agencies in the sector who can always then continue to reinforce our database and the referral systems that we use so that we can continue to connect everyone to the help that they need when they need it most. Our community navigators are there to assist whether you are the person in need or, again, if you are supporting someone else that's looking for help. And again, that could be a client, a loved one, a neighbor, anyone in your community that's struggling. And the reason the service is flexible that way is because we know that it's not always easy to reach out and ask for help or to articulate what you're going through, especially when you're struggling. Our navigators understand all of this, and that's why they're able to help offer solutions and options to people who call on behalf of someone else that might be going through a hard time. So I'll tell you another story just to illustrate how that works. So in this particular case, a father called 211 on behalf of his adult daughter. She had lost her job throughout the pandemic and had to move back into the family home. And he called simply to understand how he could help her find a way to live more independently in the community again when she was ready. So while the community navigator was looking for resources, the father started opening up a little bit more during the call to add that his daughter was really struggling with her mental health. He mentioned that she was seeing a therapist once a week, but she needed some additional supports. So the navigator asked if this was another area where he would like to receive some resources, and he said yes. So at that point, the navigator was able to expand her search to include not only affordable housing options, but also resources to help the daughter cope a bit better. So as you can see, that's really the value of having someone who can really listen and who cares enough to help address these complex needs because life's challenges don't often happen in isolation. So this is also a great opportunity for me to remind you that there's no limit as to how many questions or concerns you can bring up during a call to 211. If you're ready to talk about, say, access to food and transportation to medical appointments and finding employment, we're happy to provide you with all that information and all those referrals. But if you are feeling overwhelmed and you'd rather take things one at a time, you can call us in the morning to talk about mental health. Maybe later that day, you feel comfortable enough to talk to us about employment counseling. The following day, we can talk about medical appointments and the transportation that you need, for example. So we can basically always meet you where you're at so that you can then feel supported in your journey, whether you're looking for supports or just more information on where to go. So while it's really important for me to tell you what 211 is, it's also very important for me to remind you what 211 is not. So there are limits to the work that 211 can do. So the first thing to remember is that 211 itself is not a crisis management or a counseling service. Our community navigators are not necessarily trained to offer advice, but rather they are experts at all of the human, social, community, and government resources available. So what they can always do is provide information and referral. So their role is to connect you to all of those other supports that are available to you. That could include counseling, for example, but the counseling piece doesn't take place within the call to 211. The other thing that's really important to remember is that 211 is a non-emergency response line. What this really means is that the service is a complement to emergency service providers like 911, for example. But really, we at 211 act more as like a one-stop shop for all kinds of non-emergency needs and requests for information. Now, if someone does happen to call 211 during a moment of crisis, our 211 navigators will support them and they'll aim to de-escalate the situation based on their training. But in that case, their goal would actually be to make a direct transfer to the appropriate either crisis helpline or 911 as needed. So if ever you or someone you are supporting is in a crisis, we want you to call the right number to obtain immediate support. But if you don't happen to know or remember what that number is, then 211 is always able to help. This is why we call 211 the front door to help, because we're an easy to remember three-digit number that you can call anytime. And from there, we will connect you to the right service depending on what your needs are. Now, the kinds of services and programs that we can refer people to are incredibly broad, but they include a lot of the services that you see on the screen right now. So things like financial aid, government benefits, access to food, shelters and housing supports, programs for older adults and caregivers, job training and employment counseling supports, affordable housing resources and subsidies, supports for newcomers around things like language classes, settlement, anything like that, mental health resources, counseling, workshops, tools, supports for children, youth, families, single parents. And there's even more beyond that, things like legal aid, transportation to medical appointments, um, questions around, how to access government benefits and supports, anything like that. So as you can see, in a sense, 211 is a great resource for what I would call like that everything else category that maybe other information and response lines aren't always able to address to that same level of detail. This also means that the ways in which you can help support the 211 service are also really broad. So, from telling others about it to calling on behalf of loved ones looking for support, and even to helping us evaluate which resources might need to be updated in our database so that we can continue to make the right referrals at the right time. It really, really takes a village to help ensure that everyone has access to the help that they need. Since this is a very complex landscape and people's lives also evolve in really complex ways. So really 211 counts on everyone's support to build trust for users and the agencies that rely on our referrals as well. Just really quickly, I want to highlight how it is that 211 can help support service providers because I don't want you to think that we're here to sort of reinvent the wheel or duplicate services. So the first thing to remember is that we're a complementary service to the hard work that many organizations are already doing to provide services and support on the ground and in the front lines. And really, our goal is to ease the burden of research and navigation so that service providers can do what they're best at, which is serving their clientele. So I often give an example of how I used to work as an employment counselor for newcomers in Canada. And in my conversations with my clients around, their CV or their interview prep or labor market research, we also had to address all the other concerns that they might have had that could impact their job search. So we had to talk about things like, do they have kids? How old are the kids? Talking about how the children under the age of 13 can't stay home alone in Canada. So we needed to talk about childcare. We had to talk about things like affordable housing or affordable transportation to and from their job. So I often found myself doing a lot of research on the side of my desk just to try to find more resources and information to support my clients. But I found that I was kind of getting spread really thin and I couldn't really just focus on the pieces that I could address as an employment counselor. So now that we have a resource like 211, I would love to see professionals in similar roles be able to say to their clients, I understand that there's these other concerns that can impact your job search. We're going to focus on your CV, your interview prep, labor market research. But for all these other concerns, you can give 211 a call anytime. It's free, it's confidential, or we can call them together and explore some resources and so on. So, really, our goal is to be able to allow organizations and staff to provide holistic services to their clients by connecting those clients to additional supports for complex needs. So really, 211 can also be leveraged, by organizations, for example, after hours, during staff vacations, during the holidays, and so on, when clients might still need some holistic support around certain needs that own agency wouldn't be able to provide otherwise. So I encourage anyone and everyone that's able to help us raise awareness of 211 so that people can always have a place to turn to. Now, a couple of things that I will mention quickly is that Um, People always have an opportunity to suggest improvements and edits and additions to the 211 New Brunswick database by visiting our website. So nb211.ca/contact us. On that contact us page, you'll see links to the online forms that you can always fill out to either make a change or an edit to an existing agency profile, or to suggest a brand new listing for a program that maybe has just been launched in your community that we haven't yet captured on the 211 database, or to ask us to remove a program that's listed with 211 that no longer exists in the community. So all of that can be found online. And if you ever have any trouble, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can support you with that process. And then the other thing I quickly want to mention is that we have been collecting aggregate anonymous data based on calls to 211 since the beginning of the service back in October of 2020. So if you visit 211expansion.ca, you will be able to see all of that data for free. It's available to the public anytime. And what's really great is that that data tells us things like where people are calling from, at least just based on their postal code, what their needs are, how many people have called the service, whether there's any needs that have been unmet because there might not be services around in that particular area based on what people need and so on. So it's really interesting data that tells us like what's happening in the province and in different communities that might be prompting people to reach out to supports like 211 to look for help. But our goal is really to see that data be used by community leaders and decision makers and municipalities and so on to help inform what kinds of services or supports are needed on the ground to better meet people's needs. So I encourage you to visit 211expansion.ca to take a look at that data. And if you do want to use it for any official government reports, applications for funding, anything like that, please let us know so we can help you make sense of the data and we can tell you how to cite 211 as the source of the data. So as you can see, life can be hard, but finding help really doesn't have to be. 211 is a tool that was built for absolutely everyone. There's no age limit as to who can call, so children could call 211, older adults can call 211, and anyone in between. It's really built for everyone. So next time you're not quite sure where to turn to find the help that you need, remember that help starts here at 211. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are many different ways to actually connect with the 211 service. Of course, the easiest to remember, most intuitive one is just to dial 211, and that should connect you to the service. If ever you have any issues with that, we do have toll-free numbers that you can use instead. So the second number you see on the screen is our main toll-free line, and that also has something called video relay service capacity, which means that folks who are deaf or hard of hearing who use sign language to communicate, they can use a video interpreter to communicate using sign language to a navigator at 211 and back. And then we also have the teletypewriter line. So similarly, for folks who use a teletypewriter device, they can use the third number on the screen to connect with 211. We can also answer emails in English or French at 211mb@findhelp.ca. And of course, the website itself is very much like a search engine similar to Google, where you can search for information about programs and services in your community. There are some guidance and tips on the website for how to organize your search results and so on. And there's like a clipboard feature where you can kind of park resources that you want to refer back to as you browse. And on the website, you can also chat online with one of our navigators, again in English or French, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. So if you have any questions about the website itself or about the programs and services that you're finding, you can chat with a navigator to help you navigate through that. And then we, as of a year ago, launched a national 211 Canada app. It's available for iPhone and Android. And what's really cool about the app is that it incorporates something called natural language search, which means that you can just use everyday language to search for programs and services. So the website is a little bit more stiff, like you have to kind of know the right language that we use in the sector to find the right resources. But on the app, for example, you should be able to type things in like, I'm hungry in St. John. And that should connect you to all of the like food security resources that are in our database. So that makes it much simpler for the general public to engage with the app and use a 211 service that way. And then what's really cool is that the chat from the website has actually been incorporated into the app. So that feels very much like texting back and forth with a navigator. So for folks that prefer a more discreet way to communicate or don't necessarily feel safe enough to make a phone call, that might be a better way for them to connect with someone to ask for supports. And then, of course, you have the whole directory of resources at your fingertips. So you can always share that with your contacts, look at things on a map, take screenshots, call 211 from the app directly, and so on. Now, for anyone that might be interested in maybe becoming a 211 champion or ambassador, we have a whole kit of promotional tools and key messaging and resources that's available in English or French for download from our website. So it includes information for newsletters, social media, a widget for website, printable resources, and so on. So you can always download that from our website by visiting the Engage with Us page under Contact Us menu, or you can send me an email and I'll gladly send you a PDF of that as well if you need some tools to help us promote 211. One of the last things I'll say is that we work with incredible partners to make all of this possible here in New Brunswick. So, in particular, we have support from the Three United Ways in New Brunswick, Social Development, and ESIC, which is the Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation. And we have a special partnership with the St. John Human Development Council, who hires two full-time database editors to help us make sure that our database of programs and services remains up to date as much as possible. And then the partner that actually provides the service behind the scenes at 211 New Brunswick is called Find Help Information Services. And they're a wonderful agency based out of Ontario that also provides the 211 service in Ontario, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland. Broadly, I include community organizations because once again, without them, we wouldn't be able to do this work of referring people to one another to provide them with help. And I'm including you because I'm confident that now that you know a little bit more about 211 and what it is and how it can support you and your loved ones, you can also become an ambassador of 211. The very last thing I will say is that the 211 service is actually trademarked to United Way all across Canada. So if ever you have an opportunity to make a donation to the United Way Community Fund, it's you that's helping to ensure that someone gets the help that they need. And it's you that's helping to ensure the continuation of this great service in our province and in your community. So thank you so much for taking the time to check out this presentation. Feel free to contact me at 211info@moncton.unitedway.ca if you have any questions or would like to request any promotional materials or invite me to speak to any other groups that you might be connected with. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to stop recording now just in case there's any questions.
Sure.
And I have a couple myself, so I'm just going to stop recording now.